All right, well, I'm
Good
going to do a
stuff.
handoff now to something very different than Goldfinger. And
Yeah,
Matt, I believe you have it, right?
yeah. This is Bob Dylan, guys.
That guy.
we've- it's been a while since we've done some Dylan.
Yeah,
This
when is
is.
the last time?
Oh, I'm going to go over that,
76.
Josh.
Okay.
Desire, right?
It
the
was
last time?
Desire. Yep.
Yep.
Unless you want to count the Traveling Wilburys. But we'll
Oh,
get to
that's
that.
true.
So,
Fair point.
So yeah, this is "Time Out of Mind" by Bob Dylan. In the opening montage, you heard "Lovesick," and now you're going to hear "Not Dark Yet." All right, guys. So we have covered Bob Dylan multiple times. Care to guess how many? Just don't think about it. Just throw out a number. How many times have we covered Dylan?
8.
Quick.
10.
9. Oh, split the uprights. Right on. There you go. This is our 10th. This is our 10th time. I'm going to run these down. We covered in season 1. John Wesley Harding, season 1, episode 1, debut episode, the pilot episode of CTS, if you will. We covered Nashville Skyline in episode 5, Times Are A-Changin', episode 13, Freewheeling, episode 22, Bringing It All Back Home, episode 25, Blonde on Blonde was 27, and Highway 61 Revisited was episode 29. We covered them twice. In the 70s, season 2, Blows Blood on the Tracks, episode 23, and Desire was a bonus episode. That was bonus episode 13 of season 2. And we did do Traveling Wilburys, of which Bob Dylan was a member of, in season 3, episode 29. That was volume 1. So this is the
Multi-season presence.
yeah, the 10th time we're covering Dylan. It's his 30th studio album. So we're at 1/3 of Dylan records, which is kind of unbelievable. But this album was released on September 30th, 1997. And I'm just going to go through a quick kind of where has Dylan been from 76 to 1997.
With Jesus, from what I
With
remember.
Jesus, yes, there is some Jesus in this story. But he started it off. He went on a big tour called the Rolling Thunder Review Tour from 1975 to 1976. He then wrote, directed, and starred in a film called Ronaldo and Clara in 1978. Josh, have you ever seen that film?
No, I haven't.
Oh, well, there you go. Add that to your list, Ronaldo and Clara. And he also appeared in the band's farewell concert film, The Last Waltz, directed by Martin Scorsese, and that was in 1978. His 18th album, Street Legal, was released in 78, and that was around the time that, as John just mentioned, he did convert to evangelical Christianity, and he's got a trio of records, a trilogy, if you will, of contemporary gospel music, including 1979's Slow Train Coming, 1980's Saved, and 1981's Shot of Love. So if you want to get your Bob Dylan Jesus fix, you can seek out one of those records. In 1983, released an album called Infidels, and then Empire Burlesque in 1985. He also sang on the USA for Africa's We Are the World in 1985 and performed at Live Aid. It was at that show that he made comments that maybe that they could start using some of that money to help farmers. And those comments helped inspire Willie Nelson to start Farm Aid. So he also, I think we talked. Go ahead.
I do always remember him in that Live Aid because he comes in funny. It's like, there's a chance we're taking, saving our lives. Like, and then it's like the most. Everybody's voice is distinctive in that, but I laugh every time I hear it on the radio because it just juts out of like the song.
Well, it was great, like watching that documentary too that came out last year or whatever about that was in his presence. There was quite interesting. Guys, we did talk about this. I had forgotten about it, but he was featured on Curtis Blow's Street Rock. He's rapping at the beginning of that track. So if you ever want to hear Bob Dylan rap, go check out Street Rock. That was from 1986. He then toured with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers from 86 to 87. Also with the Grateful Dead in 1987, and that's when they released the album Dylan and the Dead. And that received fairly negative reviews, as did many of these albums that I've mentioned already. This is not Dylan's heyday. There's reasons why we are not covering those records. But Stephen Thomas Erlewine said that it was, quote, quite possibly the worst album either by Bob Dylan or the Grateful Dead. That Live Dead album apparently, or the Dylan and the Dead album is not.
Well, at least they were consistent.
And then he began his Never-Ending Tour, which is still going on June 7th, 1988. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988 by Bruce Springsteen. And then he released the album Down to the Groove that same year. Joined the Traveling Wilburys. That saw a slight, resurgence to his career for the projects that he did, Volume 1 and Volume 2 with the Traveling Wilburys. Oh Mercy was released in 1989, and that is considered by many to be his best album of the decade. So if you want to listen to Dylan's best album of the 80s, many say it is the album Oh Mercy.
Have you heard that album, Matt?
I have not.
Okay.
Nope. I am not familiar. All of these albums, except for the Traveling Wilburys that we've mentioned, I am not familiar with any of them. He released Under the Red Sky, another album I'm not familiar with, in 1990. He was also described by biographers during this time as drinking heavily, which they said was impairing his performance on stage. Dylan denied that that was a problem, that he had a drinking problem, or that his performance was being hampered on stage. But I've seen Dylan live. It's not the best thing that you might see at a concert. I'll just leave it at that. In 1992, he went back to folk and blues roots, doing some kind of albums with covers on them, Good As I've Been to You, and then 1993's World Gone Wrong. He performed at Woodstock 94. I didn't remember that. And he released his Unplugged album in 1995. So that kind of leads us up to here. So he goes in the studio to record this record, Time Out of Mind, considered by many to be his artistic return to form. It was his first album of original material since 1990's Under the Red Sky, because those other albums were many covers he was doing on those records. He began writing for Time Out of Mind at his farm in Minnesota in 1996, and he reached out to producer Daniel Lanois, who we've talked about multiple times, I think, on the podcast as well. And they began to work on recording this record with members of Dylan's touring band. And he started experimenting with new ideas, rewrote some of the lyrics. And Dylan later said that he wanted this record to be influenced by early blues musicians, such as Charlie Patton, Little Walter, and Little Willie John. Never heard of any of those artists, but those were inspirations for Dylan for this record. He actually asked Lanois to listen to those artists in preparation for the sound he was going for. Other musicians were actually brought on board. It wasn't just Dylan's touring band, and all in total, there's 13 different musicians playing on this record, which kind of led to a little bit of a cumbersome feeling in the studio. The sessions were described as a little challenging. Dylan later talked about his difficulty with the recording session, saying, in an interview with Guitar World magazine, quote, "I lost my inspiration in the studio real easy, and it's very difficult for me to think that I'm going to eclipse anything that I've ever done before. I get bored easily, and my mission, which starts out wide, becomes very dim after a few failed takes, and this and that." So not the easiest of recording sessions. There's a little lack of focus and just direction of where the music was going. Dylan also indicated that the production techniques and new technology that was had emerged by this time, they were way more in depth than what he had done earlier, especially in the 60s, and how much. But he also commented on how much those techniques and technology really contributed to the overall sound of this record. So as you guys can probably attest to, there's definitely some production choices that are being made here that's giving it like an overall effect, an overall mood. Certainly that was intentional, but Dylan did comment that that's kind of, this album certainly would not sound the same if it was done in the 60s and you didn't have some of those choices at your hand. The song Highlands, the last track on this record, was the longest song that Dylan had recorded at the time. He's actually done a song since then that's about 20 seconds longer. I like this. After they finished recording this, one of the managers came out and he said something like, "Well, Bob, have you got a shorter version of that song?" And Dylan looked at him and said, "That was the short version." So that song was inspired by the 1790 Robert Burns poem, My Heart's in the Highlands. And Dylan later said that was that poem, and that poet is one of his greatest influences. I didn't know this. After completing this record, Dylan fell ill with a near fatal bout of something called histoplasmosis, which is a fungal infection. He later said that on his farm there was some of the winds that were blowing all these different particles around, and he must have just been sitting outside too long and inhaling what apparently was fungus. So some had speculated that the songs in this record were in response to the illness that he suffered, but that actually wasn't the case, because the record was completed before he fell ill. And this record won 3 Grammys, including Best Contemporary Folk Album, Best Male Rock Performance for the song Cold Irons Bound, and it also won Album of the Year. So many people love this record, saying Dylan's back after many years of disappointment and lukewarm at best reviews. And so let's start with John, I think you really liked his last album, Desire. I remember, if I remember correctly, you were very high on that, as well as other '70s Dylan stuff. So, what about '90s Dylan? What about Time Out of Mind Dylan?
I actually was high on a lot of Dylan in the podcast. If you remember, I enjoyed both '70s albums quite a bit.
But the '70s was your favorite. Wasn't that your favorite time period?
It was, but I was a big fan of like country Dylan as well. I like John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline quite a bit, and certainly Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61. There's plenty there. I think my argument with those is just it was a little bit too much Dylan, like in it was a lot. You know what I mean to take in. So, but I like those albums and. Folk Bob Dylan, while not my first choice of where to go to, there's a lot to like right there. So my Dylan journey, I've been pretty consistent that I've liked him. This is like the cliche Dylan for me, though. I don't like this Dylan as much. I'll be very honest with you. Like, this is where the lack of tuneful singing, the dirge-like nature of this album, mixed with the fact that it's clear he's going for a blues album, the combination of what Bob Dylan is as an entity, and certainly older Dylan. What would he have been in this, like 50s? Would you say like 50s?
I can look it up. I think he's in his mid 50s, but let me check.
Yeah. The combination of like where it's a more deliberate singing style, and it takes him a while to get there. And whereas somebody like Johnny Cash, when he got older, what Johnny Cash is and that evolution to where he was really worked thematically. I just felt here this was a mismatched combination of you didn't even have to tell me, Matt, that he was trying to do an homage to really older blues musicians, because I knew without knowing that that's what he was going for in this. You're right. It is kind of weird to hear 90s production on Bob Dylan, because we've heard like 60s and 70s production, and then we heard like glistening 80s production with Dylan with the Traveling Wilburys, right? But it didn't fully stick because there really was only Tweeter and the Monkey Man, right? It was the only one that was true
Dylan song. Yeah, I think he did that all on his own.
It was fascinating. It was like, what if Bob Dylan did a song and it was Bob Dylan, but like the background of it sounded like ELO. And so I always was like, it works more than I thought it would work. Like those combination of things. And this was like, what if you take Bob Dylan, like world weary Bob Dylan, and try to make him a blues musician? And this was where my cap for what Dylan is like hit the wall, I think, a little bit, because I know this was one that was well regarded. And as I was listening to it, I said, oh, like by about track 7, I realized this isn't going to turn around for me. I don't think there's going to be a hidden gem on this. And there wasn't. The fact that he decided to put like a 17-minute song at the end reminded me of The Worst of the Doors. And I like the Doors. But remember how they'd always put like a huge track at the end that was like 13 minutes long, and you're like, why are they doing this? It really left a bad taste in my mouth all the time when it would happen. And that was how this one felt too. I was like, oh boy, like, I don't know if we needed this much of this track. There's nothing wrong with this album per se, but I don't know, man. It just, the lyrics weren't enough to drive me through. It wasn't blues enough for me, like a Clapton album would be, where he could do a blues album in his sleep that just sounded great. It wasn't poppy enough to be blues adjacent. It wasn't profound enough to be what Tom Waits does for me, with enough interesting sounds and inflections. I think my takeaway of this album, guys, sadly, was I was bored by this album a little bit. And I listened to it 3 times. The second time, it was not a good sign. The second time, I felt about it exactly the same way I felt about it the first time, which doesn't usually happen. There's usually things that are deviations, but I got the same read out of it the second time. The third time, I focused a little bit more on the lyrics, and Bob Dylan, even an album that I don't like from Bob Dylan's always going to have some good lyrics in there, and he's still a great storyteller in his lyrics. But that was really the only standout for me on this one. I gotta, for my personal tastes, I gotta give this a thumbs down. I wonder if he releases this in 1981 instead of 1997, I wonder how it would be received, because I know it was a long time between albums that critics liked from Bob Dylan or thought were celebrations. And maybe that's what gave this album a little bit more of the hosannas, or maybe there's something that's in this album that I'm missing, that I'm not giving it credit for. But for my ears and what I'm looking for, it's not for me necessarily. And it was disappointing because I think one of the interesting takeaways of the podcast has been that I've realized how much of Bob Dylan stuff I do like, and how few barriers there were for me. If you go back and listen to all of those episodes that Matt talked about, you'll hear me pretty consistently going from I really like this to there's a lot to like, but there's a few songs in there that I don't love. But in general, I think it would have been thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up consistently across the board for me on it. This is my first one that doesn't fall in that category.
Yeah, he was 56 when this album was released, so which is 9 years older than I am right now, so it's kind of weird, but yeah.
Yeah, where's your blues album, Matt?
I know, right? I'm working on it.
Yeah, I kind of have similar feelings about this album. I really didn't know what to expect. I mean, since it's been so long and this isn't, considered his prime that we covered all those other albums in, and, so I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt, but I left kind of underwhelmed as well. It's clearly like Dylan does blues, a Dylan Goes Blues album. That's apparent from the start and throughout the course of an album. For so many musicians on it too, it's really just him front and center. There's no kind of harmonies or backing vocals or anything like that throughout the album. It's pretty stripped down, despite having all this talent on it. And so I don't know, it just felt kind of low energy to me, or kind of lifeless in some ways. For somebody that's doing blues, it's like not very emotional. Like it's it's kind of reaching in that respect. We haven't covered, I was just looking over the spreadsheet, and I can't think of very many like pure blues albums that we've covered in the 90s, so I'm struggling to think of one. But I would rather listen to Steve Earle or some of those other like alt country Americana albums that kind of dabble in the blues way more than this album. What were you gonna say, John? Were you gonna jump in with something?
I was just saying, like, we've done singles that like Tracy Chapman, Give Me One Reason, and a little bit of Clapton and stuff, but not full. The blues adjacent stuff is even stuff like Sheryl Crow is not quite all the way there, but there's bits and pieces of that. But
and so it's hard. I always want to kind of give Dylan the benefit of the doubt. It's one of those, elder statesman things of music, but also the pedigree that he has. And there is some, there's definitely some songs on here that I liked, but nothing that kind of like blew my mind. I liked Lovesick, which you picked in the opening montage, and I liked Trying to Get Into Heaven. It's got some organ on there that I thought was pretty good. I think the big standout track on here is Made You Feel My Love, which I actually didn't know that was a Dylan song originally. I had heard an Adele version of that recently as a cover, and apparently it's a well-covered song, which I was not aware of until I looked into it. And so that's kind of like, I think the lasting legacy of this album is that song in some ways. I also liked Cold Iron Bounds. I liked kind of the attempts at more like gritty blue stuff in here. And sometimes it just reminded me of like Tom Waits, and I was like, oh, I'd rather listen to Tom Waits than this when at times. So yeah, this was an underwhelming one for me. It's also just so damn long, like an hour and 12 minutes. Come on. Like, he's never been a one for brevity, but if you're not feeling good in the studio, why are you like drawing it out? So like just get in and get out. I don't know. So it's a real thumbs in the middle for me. It was kind of forgettable this week, unfortunately.
I forgot in my intro to do the numbers on this because I was just rattling through all the other albums. But this is actually his 8th highest rated album, best ever albums. It's number 135 in the 1990s, number 16 in 1997, number 767 of all time. It's behind all the other albums that we covered except for John Wesley Harding, which is his 9th highest rated album, and Nashville Skyline's at 11. But all the other ones are ranked higher. So I assume neither one of you guys heard this album before this week, right?
No.
Is that right?
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. So I own this record. I've had it for years. I don't remember when. I don't think I got it in 1997, but not too long after that. And yeah, I've always kind of had mixed feelings on this. I generally think it's a pretty decent record overall, but I also think that I totally get there's a little boring element to it as well, right? It kind of drags in some places. There's some of the stuff just doesn't stick the landing or really resonate with me. I think by far my favorite song on this record is Not Dark Yet. I think that's just there's something about the way that they have that guitar, and just the way he kind of delivers that chorus. It's just, I've always really enjoyed that. That's just a great kind of laid back vibe to it. And it's definitely my standout song. Make You Feel My Love. Was never a huge fan of that. There's also a Billy Joel version, which totally makes sense. It's that's the Billy Joel. That's the song that Billy Joel would do on this, as well as, Adele did a version of that too. I highly recommend the White Stripes version of Lovesick. It's freaking awesome. It's exactly what a cover should be. And it's kind of a standard Dylan thing, right? It's like Dylan writes this song and then somebody else makes it this takes it to another level, and that certainly is an example of that. This is definitely it's a road weary Dylan. It's funny to sit here now as a 47-year-old and be like, these are the thoughts of a 56-year-old guy. And I remember I got this record. It's like, man, this guy sounds like he's about to, this is like that Warren Zevon album, like The Wind, right? It's like, I'm getting ready. I'm terminally ill and I know something's happening. So let me just kind of write, songs that have, that type of theme, that confrontation and, of death and whatnot. And this is 30 years ago and he's still alive. He's in his 80s, he's still doing shows, and you can go see him this summer, probably somewhere, So yeah, of all the Dylan records, this is the least interesting one to me. I think his voice also, this is not my favorite Dylan voice. We've talked about his voice plenty of times before, and just even young Dylan is off-putting for many people. I've always loved that voice, that kind of, that nasally kind of, that Dylan-esque voice. I just think it meshes so well with the music that he's doing. And something happened to him between, 1976 and 1997, just all the smoking. I think this was kind of there a little bit in the Traveling Wilburys too. He was kind of like, that's, you could see where his voice was going. But yeah, it's this raspy kind of is he able to sing? Is he okay? It's not a great sounding vocal, I don't think. I mean, I guess in some ways it serves this sound pretty well, but it's not the thing that I'm gravitating towards, most with Dylan. I think I wouldn't call this a straight up blues record, because even though kind of more of the upbeat songs with the full band, there's more of a blues vibe, but there's plenty of ballads in here that don't really even try to go into the blues realm. So I see this as kind of mixing and matching to an extent. But I do think that I think that Cold Iron's Bound is a pretty good song. I think Can't Wait is a decent song as well. But yeah, I'm kind of with you guys. I've always been a little nonplussed by this. This is a record that I know it's been, critically acclaimed, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to this again, and maybe this time I'm going to get it. And it's or get to that place. And I never have really. So I can appreciate it as probably being light years better than the stuff that he was doing in the years prior. And I could probably pick off, like I said, a couple of songs. Lovesick I like, but I could probably pick a couple songs, put it on a playlist, and be good with that. Listening to this, I'm kind of with you, Josh. 72 minutes, almost 73 minutes is a bit long. I don't know why Highlands needs to be 16 and a half minutes long. I mean, or even longer if there's a longer version, but probably he just needs to get all the lyrics out that he's got there. But yeah, it's a little mixed. I'm kind of in the middle. It's a mid album for me. There's things I appreciate about this. I'm glad that Dylan kind of came back and got some street cred back with some critics and some people, right? And the album that he does after this, Love and Theft, it was critically acclaimed as well. That he's done some albums since then that have kind of brought him back a little bit. That are considered better than that stuff that he was doing in the '80s, which I like. I'm happy for Dylan in that regard, and like I said, you can still go see him live and stuff. But it's just. Yeah, it's just different, right? From the Dylan that really broke down so many barriers and and influenced so many people. But so it's got some moments, but overall, it's certainly not my favorite Dylan. So kind of mid for me, I would say.
Not essential Dylan. Is what we're
I
saying.
don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, but having said that, there's people like I think Elvis Costello said that he thinks that this is the best Dylan record, right? So there's people out there that love the vibe here, that love the theme, right? The lyrics, what have you. So it's not just critics. There's musicians out there that I read that were like saying, how excellent this record is. So it's just, it's just one of those things where I just don't see it that way. So
Yep.